William Shakespeare, one of the world's most preeminent writers in English. He is widely regarded as the greatest dramatist in English language and popularly also called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon. He wrote about 39 plays and 154 sonnets. Out of all the plays that he wrote, one that endures time is Macbeth. It is a tragedy tracing Macbeth's rise to power and fall from it. A man who begins as a valiant soldier, a worthy gentleman, a worthy cousin, and the Thane of Glamis is reduced to a butcher, a hellhound, a devil, a fiend, and a bloodthirsty, unscrupulous murderer. It is all because of his ambition to rise to power, because of which he had usurped wrongly the throne of Duncan by murdering him. And that is the hamartia or the tragic flaw that brings about the downfall and finally the death of the character Macbeth. Hello everyone, I'm Madhumita. Today I am here with the story of Macbeth. It is a full-fledged play, a tragedy. But before we go through the lines of all the acts and scenes, it is important for all of you to know the storyline, to know the incidents that follow one from the other. So today I am going to give you a brief account of the story of Macbeth. The story is set in Scotland, and once upon a time, the King of Scotland, Duncan, was threatened by the rebellious MacDonald, who joined hands with the Norwegian King Sweno and the Irish forces, and was also assisted by the Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth and Banquo were the chief generals in the army of King Duncan, who was sent to the battlefield to combat the combined forces of the traitor and MacDonald. Macbeth and Banquo fought very fiercely in the battlefield, and Macbeth was termed as Bellona's bridegroom and defeated the rebels successfully. While returning from the battlefield, Macbeth and Banquo encounter three weird creatures who are popularly called the Weird Sisters, or in modern times as the Three Witches, who make certain prophecies for both Macbeth and Banquo. They greet Macbeth by his present title, calling him "Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis." Thereafter they say, "Hail to thee, the Thane of Cawdor." And finally, they greet him by the name of King Hereafter. Hearing Macbeth's prophecies, Banquo becomes interested and he asks the witches to make some prophecies about him. And they told him he would be lesser than Macbeth but greater. Not so happy but much happier, because he would never be the king, but he would engender a dynasty of kings. Banquo does not take the witches very seriously. He is happy on hearing the prophecies, but Macbeth becomes serious the moment he hears the witches' prophecies. On the other side of the battlefield, he gets the news of Macbeth's success and the betrayal of the Thane of Cawdor. King Duncan decides to put the Thane of Cawdor under execution. He suffers under the heavy punishment of being executed, and he invests Macbeth with the new title of the Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth and Banquo, while returning from the heath place where they had met the three sisters, the weird sisters, they got the news that Macbeth had become the Thane of Cawdor, and that arouses in Macbeth a further ambition to see the third prophecy of the witches fulfilled in his life. He starts harboring the ambition of becoming the king. They meet the king, and the king announces that as a token of his gratitude for Macbeth, he would pay a visit to his castle and take the hospitality of him and his wife for a night. Macbeth, being ambitious about the final prophecy of the witches, is disturbed. He is disturbed by his ambition on one hand and a little confusion on the other, whether to trust entirely the prophecies of the witches. At that point of time, while Macbeth is busy meditating upon such ideas, King Duncan announces his elder son Malcolm as the crown prince. Malcolm was to become the successor of King Duncan. Macbeth realizes that this was going to be a stumbling point on his way to success. Macbeth from there sends a letter to his wife, Lady Macbeth, telling her all about the prophecies of the witches and how the first one had come true. Lady Macbeth, who was ambitious for her husband, desires kingship for him and wants him to murder Duncan in order to ascend the throne. When Macbeth arrives at his castle in Inverness, she overrides all of her husband's objections and persuades him to kill Duncan that very night for which he was to stay at the castle. Macbeth, as earlier, was confused whether it was right to kill a guest in spite of being a host. And moreover, he was not just the host of Duncan, he was the first cousin too. Duncan arrives at Macbeth's castle, receives a very warm welcome, attends the grand dinner, and he is happy with the hospitality of Lady Macbeth and presents her with a big diamond. Macbeth, having drugged the guards of Duncan's chamber along with his wife, finally stabs Duncan to death. Horrified by what he had done, Macbeth comes back to his wife. He is afraid that the guards might bear witness against him, and so, in a hurry, he forgets to get rid of the dagger with which he had killed Duncan, brings it away with him. Lady Macbeth scolds him for having done such a silly job and asks him to go back to that same chamber to smear the guards with the blood of Duncan and to keep the dagger beside them. Macbeth is terrified by the very idea of returning, and here Lady Macbeth takes up the job on herself. She goes and keeps the dagger and smudges blood all over the faces and bodies of the two chamber guards of Duncan. As assigned to Macduff, the Thane of Fife, he arrives the very next morning in order to take the king, to escort him away from the castle of Inverness, and to his horror discovers the dead body. Lady Macbeth, on hearing the news of Duncan's death, feigns, or rather pretends to faint and become unconscious. And Macbeth, in a rush and out of fear, goes back to the chamber and kills the two guards of Duncan, thinking that they might be able to prove their innocence against the crime. Macduff becomes suspicious, and at this juncture, the two sons of Duncan, Malcolm and Donalbain, fearing that they would be accused of parricide, that they could be charged with the murder of their father, and also fearing that they also could be annihilated, they run away from the castle. Malcolm goes to the court of England, while Donalbain proceeds to Ireland. With the absence of the Crown Prince and Donalbain, Macbeth ascends the throne. He is crowned the King of Scotland. Macbeth is crowned the King of Scotland as he is the next kinsman to Duncan. But Banquo becomes suspicious of some foul play on the part of Macbeth. Even after becoming the king and the queen, Macbeth does not find any ease of mind. He is disturbed. And in order to make things easier, to tie up the loose ends, he invites all the lords and thanes under him to a banquet. But underlying this generosity and order that he puts up in the banquet, he hatches a malicious plan to get rid of Banquo, to kill him, because Banquo was supposed to be the only one that he feared the most. Macbeth became paranoid, and he assigns the two murderers that he had appointed to get rid of not only Banquo but even his son Fleance. In the process, the murderers are successful in getting rid of Banquo, but Fleance escapes. Macbeth is once again tormented. He is furious and he is also fear-stricken, because his power remains insecure as long as Banquo's progeny or Fleance is alive. At the banquet, as he raises a toast to all the lords present, to all their health, and takes the name of his absent friend Banquo, he visualizes the ghost of Banquo with its face smeared with blood, its head filled with blood. Macbeth is shaken to the core and he starts talking incoherently. The guests start panicking, thinking that something serious had taken place. The desperate Lady Macbeth takes control of the situation and successfully convinces the lords that it was an indisposition that her husband suffered from his very youth. But finally, when she realizes that her husband was behaving in a very weird manner, she asks all the lords to leave the banquet at once. Macbeth then decides to visit the weird sisters once again, to know more about his future. He says that he was ready to know the worst by the worst possible means. When Macbeth goes and meets the weird sisters next, they show him 3 apparitions. The first apparition warns Macbeth against Macduff, the Thane of Fife. The second apparition gives him a peaceful news, a pacifying news, that Macbeth cannot be killed by any man who is born of a woman. It gives him a false sense of security because he knew that all men were born of women. The third apparition tells Macbeth once again that he would be unvanquished, he could never be defeated in any battle until the woods of Burnham walked up to the Dunsinane castle, which was his stronghold. Once again, Macbeth understood that a forest cannot walk on its own, and so the possibility of his defeat was absolutely not negative. Next, Macbeth's henchmen invade Macduff's castle because Macduff had earlier declined the invitation to Macbeth's banquet. Macduff had already proceeded to England to meet Malcolm, and in his castle at Fife, all the assassins appointed by Macbeth find only Macduff's wife and his children, who are brutally killed by them. In the meantime, Macduff, who had gone to Malcolm, joined hands with him, and with the help of King Edward, England's king, Edward the Confessor, Malcolm and Macduff raise forces in order to invade the castle of Macbeth and fight against him. By this time, because of all the whirlpool of happenings, by the spiraling fall of her husband, Lady Macbeth was turned insane. She started walking in her sleep. She had become a somnambulist, and she started seeing stains of blood, perpetual stains of blood on her hand. Macbeth, on the other side, also goes through increasing fits of desperation. Finally, Lady Macbeth takes her own life. She kills herself, and in spite of being the two partners in crime, in spite of being royal partners, finally Macbeth is left all by himself. He is alone. The English and the rebel Scottish armies who had gone against Macbeth, the Scottish lords who had gone against Macbeth, joined hands with the English army, and under the leadership of Malcolm, they meet at Burnham Wood. Malcolm instructs them to hew off certain branches from the trees of the Burnham forest and hold each one of the soldiers to hold a branch in front of them in order to camouflage them, so that Macbeth would not be able to assess the number of soldiers in the army that was marching towards his castle. Now, from Macbeth's castle, a servant informed him that the Burnham Wood was walking up towards the Dunsinane Hill. Macbeth is shocked to hear the news that the trees of Burnham had uprooted themselves and were walking up, and he immediately recalls the prophecies of the witches. Macbeth decides to fight with the forces of Malcolm and is not ready to give up before he is killed. He comes face to face with Macduff, who is seen eagerly looking for him in order to avenge the death of his family, the death of his wife and his children in the hands of the hellhound, the name by which he calls Macbeth. Macbeth boasts that he need not fear Macduff because he was born of a woman, and at this juncture Macduff informs him that he had been untimely ripped from his mother's womb. He was born by a caesarean section. So in a way, he did not have a natural birth by a woman. It is at this point of time that Macbeth realizes that the witches had deceived him by their equivocation, and he had committed the gravest mistake of his life by believing in what the witches had said. He had misinterpreted the words of the weird sisters. In spite of that, Macbeth, unwilling to surrender to Macduff, asks him for a duel combat, and he continues fighting until Macduff kills him and beheads him, thereby fulfilling the remaining prophecies of the witches. The battle comes to an end, and Malcolm, the rightful heir to the throne of Duncan, is crowned the King of Scotland, and once again, with the death of Macbeth, harmony, accord, and peace are restored in Scotland. This is what the story of Macbeth is all about. I will soon be back with the detailed study of all the acts and the scenes of Macbeth for your perusal. In the meantime, stay tuned and do not forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel, English with Passion and Purpose. Bye.